All right, bands, artists, we have got to talk. There are some things that you have to stop doing, and some things that you really need to start doing when you're in the studio. If you don't know, my name's Adam, and I've run and produced at commercial studios for around a decade, and I've worked with hundreds of artists, big and small. So let's go lightning round style through some do's and some don'ts of the studio. And the last few will really save you from embarrassment. And let's turn this into a game. At the end of the video, let me know in the comments how many of these you disagree with, and whoever agrees with me the most, well, they get a gold star. So let's dive in and get started. Do set up your instruments before you come in. A few days before you go into the studio, pick up some fresh heads for your drums, fresh strings for your guitars, and make sure that they'll stay in tune and they aren't making a bunch of noise. I hate to have to push someone to use my gear when they're stoked about using their own, but if your guitar has crusty strings that just won't stop buzzing, that is going to sound bad and waste tons of time in the studio. Don't be sketchy about money. If you don't have the money already budgeted, don't start the project. We have enough on our minds as it is without having to chase down payments from artists, and if getting a flat tire is enough of a hurdle that you're going to skip out on paying us, just wait a few more weeks to start recording. Do ask questions. If you're curious about a piece of gear or what the producer is doing on the computer, it is okay to ask questions. It's more fun to work with people who are engaged and interested in the project instead of people who are stone-faced the entire time. Don't bring your dog or cat to the studio without asking. It's embarrassing that I even have to say this, but it's happened more than once. I'm allergic to dander, and lots of people just don't want the liability of having animals running around in their space. If your dog knocks over my mic, I don't think it has a bank account to pay for the repairs. Do speak up if you don't like the direction something is heading. It's disheartening to work on an idea for a couple of hours and then hear, "Hey, sorry, I didn't want to say anything, but this really isn't the vibe that I'm going for." It's your song, it's your project. So speak up and make sure that you're enjoying the results. Don't make judgment calls too early in the process. So on the flip side of the last one, let things develop a little before you freak out. This one has a lot to do with mixing, but it also applies to production too. And Shane Lance, who's an awesome engineer, he has an analogy.
Having an artist present during the mixing process is a lot like having someone sit across the table from you when you make cookies, and like they taste the cookies at every stage of the process. And to most people, raw flour and eggs just aren't gonna taste good together. And so they taste them and they're like, I don't know, that doesn't taste quite right. And you're like, well, yeah, it's not. I mean, we're like 20% done right now. I was thinking something sweeter. What do you think of sweeter? And you're like, well, yeah, I would usually sweeten it later. And they're like, no, I think sweeter. Let's do sweeter. So you add sugar, and then you get to the end of the process or near the end, and they're like, I don't know, something's off. And it's like, well, yeah, because I know how to make cookies, and I know the order, and I know how things taste along the way, and you don't.
Some things take time to develop, and sometimes something has to sound worse for a second so that we can make it sound better. So let the process play out. Do show up on time. And be realistic about when you want to show up. If you're someone who sleeps in all the time, please do not book an 8 a.m. session because you're excited just to miss the call time by an hour. Don't turn a project into a rush job because you randomly decided on a release date. If you're halfway through a song and then you just suddenly decide that it needs to come out in exactly 4 weeks, well, that's just annoying for everyone involved. I personally will charge extra if I need to totally expedite something, since it'll mean that I'm pulling double duty to get it out in time. So please just communicate your release dates in the planning stage of the project and everything will be a-okay. Do take time to warm up. If the engineer is setting up mics, that is a great time to step out for a vocal warm-up. Don't overdo your warm-ups or warm up too early. If you warm up at home or on the car ride to the studio, you might cool down again before it's your turn to lay down your parts. So just make sure you get the timing right. Do take care of your voice in the lead up to studio time. So I've had to push back sessions because singers went to like a football game the night before recording, or maybe they went a little too hard at the club the night before, and then they couldn't lay down their best work the next day. Your voice is an instrument, and you need to take care of it, and it will allow you to perform at a high level. But if you treat it badly, then you're gonna have a hard time. Don't be pushy with studio rules. If the studio has a no smoking rule or they don't want you to bring a bunch of guests, just accept it and move on. Trying to pressure them to let you bend their rules is just annoying and it doesn't make people want to work with you. There have been times where I've basically fired clients because they were always pushing and trying to bend the rules at every step of the process. Do respect your producer or engineer's limits. If your producer is saying that they need to wrap up the session after like 10 hours, just take that as a sign to wrap it up and then get back to it after they get some sleep. Their work will be so much better. And if they want to listen quietly, then don't ask them to turn the speakers up constantly. Our ears can only take so much abuse, so let us have those breaks, let us get a good night's sleep between sessions, all that good stuff. And in the same vein, if we're grabbing food during the session, it's cool to say for here instead of to go sometimes. I don't want to eat 75% of my meals at the recording desk or sitting at a console. I get that you're excited to be in the studio for a few weeks out of the year, but for us, this is our day-to-day lives, so keep that in mind before you push us to work 16 hours straight every single day. Don't tell us our price is too high because someone else you worked with does it for less. If you like their price so much, then you can go work with them. I'm assuming you stopped working with them for a reason. So if they quit recording and went on to do other things, it's probably because they couldn't sustain a business with their cheap rates. Do send all of your revisions all at once. It is super frustrating to get a second list of totally different revisions after we knock out the first ones. If you know that you want the bass louder, the snare to have a little more punch, and the vocals to be more wet, let us know all at once instead of having us do 3 different revisions. And also, if there are 4 people in your band, have an internal discussion and come up with your notes together. I don't need 4 different lists telling me to turn up everyone's parts a little bit. Don't send references after the project has already started. If you have a vision for something, lay it out early in the process. It's pretty frustrating to be told 30 hours into a project that you always wanted it to sound a little more like Coldplay and a little less like Radiohead. Do tag your producer and the studio in your posts and credit them on the project, especially when you upload it to Spotify, and triple especially when you get CDs or vinyl printed. It is always a bummer to see an empty produced by section in the Spotify credits. Don't ask everyone you know for their notes after the project is already approved. If you want to incorporate someone else's opinions on the song, do it early and include their opinions with your notes. If we're right at the end of the mixing process, the last thing I want for you to do is to hit me with a text that says, "Hey, so I sent this song to an engineer buddy of mine and they have some suggestions." If you trust the people that you're working with, then let them do their thing. There are a million different ways to make a good song. So trying to derail the project to fit it to the tastes of someone else, to some other producer or engineer, well, that's just a waste of time. Do make demos or even scratch tracks at home. If you're able to record your rehearsals or lay down some basic demos before you come in, that's a great thing. I always love having the ability to give feedback on the songs ahead of time, or to have some time to really come up with a game plan and to nail the song before the sessions even start. Now on the flip side, don't get too attached to that demo. Demoitis, as it's been called, is a condition where an artist gets so attached to the demo of a song that they refuse to change anything, even if it would make the song better. Not that better is a set in stone objective thing, but still, getting hooked to an early version of the song, an underdeveloped version of the song, it's not always the best idea. Do tell your friends and other artists who worked on your music. Word of mouth is absolutely massive in the music world, so don't be shy about spreading the word if you're happy with your songs. It goes a lot further than you realize. Don't have band drama in the studio. Bringing your engineer or producer into your band's drama is super unprofessional. Talking trash about members of your band behind their back is a bad look, especially in the studio. I've had bands come in and they couldn't stand each other and they made it everyone else's problem. And it really brings the mood down all around. We're in this to have fun, to make great songs, and to build careers. And drama just makes it so much harder to do any of those things. Do Take as much work off as you can on your studio days. I don't love waiting until 6 p.m. for Jerry to get off work so that he can come lay down the bass when we finish tracking drums at 3. And if you don't have the day officially off, but you think that you can cut out early, I'm sorry, but that doesn't count. I really don't want to scrub a session the day of because you thought that you could probably get the second half of your shift covered, but then the cover ended up waking up with a cold. Don't talk through the entire session. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had to ask band members to keep it down while I'm trying to track a vocal or listen back to takes. If you can't keep a lid on it, then go sit in the lobby or read a book instead of having a full-blown conversation 5 feet away from people that are trying to work on music. Oh, and by the way, artists, if you think I'm being a little harsh to y'all today, don't worry, because next week I'm turning it around on all of us producers and engineers with my own list of do's and don'ts for us. So subscribe if you want to see that. I think you're going to like it. And by the way, if you're still keeping count and you've disagreed with less than 16 or so of these, then go ahead and give this video a like. All right, so let's wrap up with the final 3, and these are the big ones. Do respect the equipment. Studio gear is generally pretty expensive, so don't practice your judo kicks in the vocal booth. Try not to step on cables if you can avoid it, and just generally be chill inside the studio. It's not an obstacle course, so take your time and make sure you don't knock down any guitar stands, mic stands, or anything else. Don't try to get people to work for free or for quote unquote exposure. If you're a big enough deal that working with you is great exposure, then realistically, you should have some cash in your pocket to pay your people. That's just common sense, right? I think I've never been more offended by a client trying to bargain with me than when they said that they would shout me out on their social media and make sure they knew who recorded their music if I gave them a deal. Like, that is kind of just part of being cool and being chill, I think. And the very last do, the most important one of them all, wear deodorant to your sessions. You're going to be in a small room for a long time. Just do it. So that's the list of do's and don'ts in the studio. And don't forget to check back next week for the producer version. If there's anything you think I forgot or you think that I should add into next week's, let me know in the comments, and then check out this video right here next.